Hi, I'm Enrique Flores Galbis, and I'm a painter and a writer, but mostly I'm a storyteller. Sometimes I use paint to tell my stories, and sometimes I use words. When you have a story to tell, it doesn't matter how you do it. What is important is that you get it out. I was born in Havana right at the beginning of the Cuban Revolution. I left Cuba when I was 9, 2 years after the rebels came rumbling into Havana. Cuba is a beautiful tropical island with plenty of beaches to run on, blue seas to sail, and green hills to gallop over. It was a wonderful place to grow up, but there was always a revolution bubbling in the background. That growing protest, the sound of gunfire at night, echoing in the distance but getting closer. Then the militia, in their lizard green uniforms, came knocking on our front door in broad daylight. They called them Los Barbudos, the bearded ones. Although most were too young to grow anything resembling a beard, they strutted around with their three hairs sticking out of their chins, a beret at a cocky angle, and their little machine guns that looked like ray guns to me. One look at the bearded ones and you knew that things were going to change fast, and maybe not for the better. My parents and their friends no longer laughed and talked like they used to. Now they chose their words carefully, whispering their opinions only when they were sure that nobody was listening. The revolution was scrambling things that kept us together: school, baseball, and churches. We were watching our country fly apart, and it was getting dangerous. So our parents decided that my brothers and I weren't safe in Havana. We had to leave, but they were not allowed to go. Luckily, they found a U.S. program, Operation Pedro Pan, that helped young children escape the island without their parents. In a year and a half, 14,000 children flew out of the country to refugee camps in South Florida, where we would wait for our parents or be taken in by a foster family. Later on, when our children were old enough to go to summer camp, I remember the endless trips to Vermont or Massachusetts to check out these camps, touring their kitchens, squeezing the thin mattresses, inspecting the cabins, noticing every detail just to make sure our children would be safe there. That's when I realized just how hard it must have been for my parents to let us go, off to a strange country, not sure where we would land, how long we would be gone, or if we would be safe there. They must have thought we would not be gone for too long, though, because we packed light, a small suitcase each. My mother wanted us to make a good impression, so she bought the nicest clothes she could find. I don't know if we impressed anybody, but it's not easy to blend in when you're the only kid in that New England playground wearing crisp white linen pants, a green silk shirt, and two-tone shoes. I guess it never crossed her mind to pack a pair of sneakers or maybe some jeans to play in. The day we left, I remember climbing up the steps of the airplane, trying to keep a brave face like my older brothers. I was carrying that small blue suitcase and a box of Cuban cigars that our father had handed us at the last minute. I asked him, why the cigars? He said they were a gift for JFK, and we were to make sure that he got them. I figured that this JFK must be a fine friend of my father's, so I kept the cigars close. The flight was a short one. We landed and everyone put away their rosary beads and picked up their little American flags we found on our seats, and they cheered for the USA. I was at the bottom of the stairs when I saw the man in a dark suit, sunglasses, and a little wire in his ear. As I passed by, he grabbed for my box of cigars and I pulled it away. Hey, these are for JFK, I said. The man handed me a $10 bill. After inspecting the bill, I asked him, are you JFK? No, I'm just a friend of his, but I'll make sure that he gets these. Now move along, he said. When my uncle finally arrived in the U.S., he took us in, even though we had 4 kids of his own. My 2 brothers and I slept in the same bed in a tiny room in the basement. The room was so small that you had to step outside to change your mind. School was challenging because we really didn't speak English, and there were no other foreign-born kids to blend in with. We were the only ones with the funny accents and the outfits that made us look like used car salesmen. We were saved by baseball, though. Now we had a language that we all could understand. Cubans are just as fanatical about baseball as Americans are. In Cuba, we played so much that my father had an empty lot next to our house cleared for the baseball diamond. And he bought enough gloves and gear for 2 teams. We even had batting helmets. At first, it was mostly friends from the neighborhood that played. But as the revolution became more dangerous, more kids started to leave. Their places were taken by the kids from the poorer neighborhoods who came with no shoes, and they cheered when my mother brought out the ham sandwiches and Pepsis for our meriendas, our midday snack. At that time in Havana, there were some very rich people, and there were many very poor people. But on the same baseball, on that baseball diamond that summer, no one mentioned what their fathers did or didn't do for a living, or what they did or did not have for dinner. No one paid attention to the dirty feet and the ripped shorts, or for that matter, the spotless polo shirts and new sneakers. All that mattered was how well you could throw, catch, and hit the ball. For the last game we played before we left, my father came out and gave away the gloves, the bats, and even the Yankee batting helmets. He said he would buy us new ones when we came back. Well, it was almost 36 years to the day, but I came back, not to play baseball, but to paint and sketch in Havana. I had been painting Havana from memory, and now I wanted to compare my nostalgic memories to the gritty facts of the moment, how it really was, how it was now. As I walked around the city, of course, it all looked smaller. It was older and faded. Buildings that I remember standing tall now crumbled into the street. I visited a family that lived in a house with no roof. Used to be a nice house. I remember visiting it with my parents before we left. Then the strangest thing happened. I started remembering things that I had not thought about for 35 years. Every street brought up another set of characters, another story. They were coming so fast that I was afraid I would forget them, so I had to stop painting just to write them down. When I got home, the 4 drawing books I had intended to fill with sketches were now full of stories instead. Stories that I shared with my curious kids at bedtime. After telling these stories, they turned into 2 books, Raining Sardines and 90 Miles to Havana. I have returned to Cuba several times now to paint and write the stories I hear and see as I walk around that beautiful island. And I hope to return again. I hope you have a fun time reading 90 Miles to Havana. Hasta luego, amigos.